Hi everyone. In today's lecture, we're going to be focusing on adolescent social and emotional development. There are a few additional videos on slide 9, so make sure to take a peek at those, and I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. All right, so to get us started, let's just make sure that we go over identity. So we have been focusing on identity from infancy, and now we're getting into adolescence. So we've had a lot of time to review Erikson and all of the different aspects of what identity looks like. But just to review, identity is a psychosocial aspect of development, and during adolescence, it's often understood as a search for consistency in understanding ourselves. So we are going through identity versus role confusion, and there's a lot of components to break down with what that looks like. We're going through many changes with our bodies. We are in a whole new aspect regarding our school, our peers, our community. We are on the cusp of childhood and adulthood, so there's a lot of elements of our identity that we are working on, figuring out who we are. And the consistent definition of oneself is being a unique individual, and this again is a compilation of our roles, our attitudes, beliefs, and aspirations. All right, so let's talk about Erikson's fifth stage of psychosocial development. So we are right in the middle of our lives, and we're in the middle of identity versus role confusion. So who am I? What am I doing with my life? And so this is when a person is trying to figure out who they are, but they're often confused about which possible route to go and different roles to adopt and what they should be doing with their lives. And so we see that if a person has reached identity achievement, this would occur at the point in which they understand who he or she is as a unique individual, and they're in accordance with their past experiences and prepared for their future. And so I've given a little chart here to kind of break down what that would look like if identity achievement has been reached or if we are still in a stage of role confusion. Now keep in mind, you might reach one aspect of identity achievement and then be kind of in a downward spiral of role confusion all over again within a next stage within your life. So as we are entering into young adulthood, you might have another breach of role confusion and kind of be set back a little bit as you're potentially moving through college, or maybe you're venturing off into the working world right away. And so we see that if a person has a commitment to their identity and they're exploring their options, this is when identity achievement can be reached. However, if there is little to no exploration, we might see that there's an identity foreclosure. So if I'm committed to my identity, I'm exploring a variety of different options. Maybe I'm getting involved in different aspects of my community. I'm trying out different clubs at school. I'm applying for different positions in colleges. I may be meeting with different instructors or professors, or maybe I'm getting involved, like I said, in the local community, and so I have opportunities to explore and try things out. Whereas maybe if I am not interested in joining clubs, or the opportunity presents itself where my friend allows me to come and visit with their parents who own a firm that I'm interested in, or the opportunity arises for me to travel and I deny that, I might have identity foreclosure, so no exploration could lead to a foreclosure, and then I would continue to be in the cycle of role confusion. Also, we see that there could potentially be no commitment at all. So maybe I have no motivations, no drives. I don't know what I want to do with my life. And if I'm in the position of being in a high school setting and there are little to no opportunities presented to me, I may see that there is a decline in my identity and a diffusion in that. So I could potentially be exploring things, but I'm not committed to it. And so this could be where we're in identity moratorium, and so maybe I am exploring things, but I just have no drive for them. And if I'm not exploring and I'm not committed, I'm kind of just stuck where I'm at and I'm not moving forward. So consider that there are many different components of where we might be at in the who am I question, and different life experiences, different ways that we approach things, different opportunities that are presented to us can make or break the ability for us to either explore or veer off into non-exploration within the things that we want to do in life. When thinking about identity status during adolescence, there are a few different aspects that we may consider that adolescents are in between or trying to figure out or in crisis mode over potentially. So if we are moving forward with healthy identity status, we see that most adolescents are thinking about their religious aspects, political aspects, vocational aspects, and gender elements of who they are and their identity. However, there may be many elements of role confusion in one or more of these areas. So when it comes to religious aspects of identity, most adolescents accept broad outlines of their parental or cultural religious areas, and this is coming from early childhood development, socialization within a specific religious group, and specific religious beliefs may be questioned during this time, and we could have a complete flipped in script, but oftentimes we do see that adolescents align with their parental and cultural values related to religion. Same with political aspects. We do often follow in line during this time with our parental views. However, keep in mind that based on the type of parenting, the experiences that one has, and the different aspects of their community and peer influences, there may be variations in this. And we see that most adolescents also identify with their ethnicities during this time. And in regards to vocational identity status, so their careers, their aspirations, their goals in this regard, we see that there is a strong drive of the school, the parents, and peers in what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? What am I going to get involved in? And so this can be an altering aspect in the life choices that we make. And so if we make choices that are jeopardizing potential career-related goals, we may be in identity crisis related to what we're going to be doing for the rest of our lives. So maybe we didn't end up applying to colleges, and so this could limit the amount of opportunities that we have to become educated in the field that we were interested in. Or if we got in trouble and were in juvenile detention or jail prior to admissions, this may jeopardize future career goals or future opportunities to become in the workforce. We also see that part-time work during high school can often be related to negative outcomes. So we may see that adolescents who are engaging in part-time work don't have opportunities to participate in applying for colleges. Maybe they are the primary caretaker of the household and the one who is in charge of financial stability, and so they don't have time to participate in school as well as work. We might also see that if they are working, this could decrease the amount of time that they spend engaging in peer activities and socialization. And so these are some of the outcomes that may be present with part-time work during high school. And in regards to gender, we do see that the inner concept of who you are is starting to evolve in a different regard. So we see that in early childhood that we have ideas about what gender is, and we're starting to identify male versus female. However, we start to see that our sexual orientation or our preference for someone sexually or romantically who we're attracted to, this is starting to change. And so gender roles have changed based on parenting, and so we might see that we have non-traditional gender roles, and stereotypical gender roles are not something that is present within our household, or we have more opportunities to learn about different types of sexual orientation. There could also be a potential clash with our religious values and our sexual orientation, our knowledge of different ideas about sex and gender. And so there are many different aspects of our identity that could be confused during this time. So these are just some of the areas in a little bit of detail related to identity and adolescence. When it comes to relationships during adolescence, we do see a slight shift in our relationships with our adults, parents, teachers, people who are older than us. So the parent-adolescent conflict typically peaks in early adolescence. Again, keep in mind this is the time when puberty is happening and there are more signs of attachment than distance. And often we see behaviors such as bickering involving pettiness, peevish arguing, and this is usually repeated and ongoing. Again, we do have to consider different parenting styles as well as different temperaments of both the parent and the child, and was the goodness of fit determined earlier on. However, typical teenage behaviors often have conflicting engagement within a parent and adolescent relationship. And although we see that teenagers may act as if they no longer need their parents, neglect can be very destructive. So it's very important for adults to still remain with warmth and care, consideration, and if there's too much criticism or control or backlash, again related to different parenting styles, this may stop dialogue and this could cut out or limit communication and increase risky behaviors, as well as close the door for opportunities for adolescents to communicate effectively with their peers as well as do well in school. And so sometimes adults may be unaware of adolescents' desire for respect from their peers as well as from adults. Again, they are in this midst of childhood versus adulthood, and so they want to still have opportunities to be carefree and not have as much responsibility, where on the other side they also want respect and have the desire to do things on their own and be independent. And keep in mind they are in an element of identity versus role confusion, so they are on the cusp of, am I still a child? Am I an adult? Where am I at currently? What am I doing with my life? I want to be an adult. However, I don't want to take on that much responsibility yet. And so I have a push and pull relationship with close adults in my life. When it comes to relationships with peers during adolescence, we see that peers are the ones who provide the most support, and they help navigate physical changes of puberty. They also help with intellectual challenges of high school, and last but not least, the social changes of leaving childhood. So we are in unison with our peers during the time of adolescence. They understand what's happening during puberty because they are going through it at the same time. They get the challenges of high school because they are living it alongside with us, as well as the cusp between childhood and adulthood. They get it. They're right there with us. So this is why peer relationships are essentially vital during adolescence, and they're extremely helpful during times of stress. They're someone that we can relate to, and so it's very important for peers to have healthy relationships with one another. And when there are healthy relationships between peers, this leads to less susceptibility to peer pressure in later adolescence. So this is why it's very important for us to start to form healthy relationships with our peers earlier on. And it's important for parents to be clued in. What's going on in my child's life? How do I make sure that they are getting involved with people who are on the same pathway as them in order to create opportunities for healthy peer relationships? And keep in mind that a healthy peer relationship stems from a healthy parent-to-child relationship. So different parenting styles influence our abilities to make connections with peers, have healthy ways for problem solving, communication, our ability to navigate difficult opportunities that may be presented to us, such as risk-taking behaviors. And so we see that peer group choices are influenced by genes and early experiences. Again, early experiences related to, was I being yelled at when I was told no, I couldn't do something, or was I given guidance and provided opportunities for open dialogue and discussion? And so we see that peers can lead one another into trouble and collectively provide deviancy training. So again, getting them into trouble and define different aspects of the rules and their morals. We also see that not only do we have peer relationships that are platonic or just a friendship, but we do see that first romances start to appear in high school, and they don't often last more than a year. However, we do have, some who beat the odds and get into adulthood and say, we were high school sweethearts, but most of the time we see that our first relationships and romances are often flings, and breakups are common to happen, and unreciprocated crushes are very common. It's also important for us to consider the element of technology and online dating, and that this could contribute to unreciprocated crushes, more opportunities for engaging in breakups without actually having to interact with one another. And so we may see that there are more behaviors of flirting and engaging in discussion that is not actually healthy online. And so we see that our first romances may be driven more by our sexual desires and our increased need for engagement with others driven by puberty changes. We also see that adolescents are often crushed by rejection, and sometimes this can lead to them to contemplate revenge or suicide. So it's important to be aware that different aspects of peer relationships may be a make or break point for mental health aspects. Some of the common behaviors that we see with teens are externalizing and internalizing behaviors. And so with externalizing behaviors, these are connected with violent outbursts, defying parents and adults, engaging in bullying, fighting, and breaking the law. So when you're thinking about external versus internal, externalizing exterior, outside, internalizing inside, interior of our bodies, inside our brains, our minds. So our internalizing behaviors are connected to our mental health, so depression, anxiety, elements of suicide, excessive worrying, being socially withdrawn. So it's important to recognize that there could potentially be a prevalence of both externalizing and internalizing behaviors, and that they could be connected with one another. We also see that different aspects of our relationships with adults, relationships with peers, elements of identity versus role confusion all influence teen behaviors. And of course, puberty is driving our emotional thoughts as well. And so the prevalence and incidence of criminal activities are more common in adolescence, and so it is important to consider that this could be due to different types of behaviors that they are expressing, but we should not ignore them or dismiss them just because they're teenagers. It is still important to recognize what appropriate socialization looks like in different types of settings: school, home, with our peers, how we communicate with one another, what are appropriate ways to interact instead of having a violent outburst when somebody bumps into us in the hallway, or if someone else has a crush on the same person that we do and they start dating. How do we engage in appropriate behaviors? Maybe we're excessively worrying over our grades within our school and where we're going to go vocationally within our lives, and this is causing us to have decreased self-esteem and identity confusion. And so many different aspects of teen behaviors should be addressed immediately so that they don't perseverate and persist into adulthood. Last but not least, I wanted to share a little bit related to teens and stress. So when thinking about teenagers, self-esteem is beginning to decline at the start of puberty. And so we do see that there are more common signs for depression during this time. And so depression occurs when there are feelings of hopelessness, lethargy, worthlessness, and this is happening when it is at least 2 weeks or more. So sometimes we might have a momentary feeling of lethargy or feeling worthless or hopeless. However, depression is when these symptoms are lasting and persistent, perseverating. It's an everyday occurrence, struggling to engage in day-to-day living tasks, get out of bed, engage socially with others. We also see that suicidal ideation or thinking about suicide, usually with some serious emotional or intellectual and or cognitive overtones, can occur. And so suicidal ideation, depression, elements of stress, they should not be taken lightly. I did include on the next slide a important risk factors for suicide handout. And so I recommend taking a peek at that, as well as taking a peek at the 2 videos that I have here. So the first video is a suicide awareness and prevention for families and educators webinar. So this is actually something that I did with my mom during COVID. We put together information on how to create awareness for suicide and provide prevention opportunities for understanding risk factors of suicide for families and educators. And we talked about teens and what this looks like, and how some of the risk factors can be history of substance abuse and exposure to online bullying, as well as if there's an identified mental health condition, potentially ACEs, such as dealing with the death of a close friend or family member, relationship problems. There are so many different aspects of what could be contributing to signs of suicidal ideation, as well as areas of mental health concerns. And so it's important to look at different aspects of elements of the family and parental parameters, as well as what peer support looks like during this time. And it's important for parents and adults to have knowledge of these suicidal signs and symptoms, and to have real conversations about mental health and suicide. And having real conversations supports teens and their stress, and it supports them in being able to get the resources that they need and to have a sense of community. So I have an additional link about speaking up on teen stress. So just 2 great resources for you. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.